A business problem needs a creative solution. Blake Montgomery stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Boston architectural firm, watching the Charles River flow beneath the autumn sun. At 36, he had built one of the most respected design companies on the East Coast. His buildings graced city skylines from Miami to Seattle. But today, simple, cream-colored envelope on his desk felt heavier than any steel beam he had ever specified. The invitation announced his younger sister, Hannah's wedding in Martha's Vineyard, 3 weeks away. The problem was not the wedding itself. Blake adored Hannah and genuinely liked Tyler, her kind-hearted fiancé. The problem was the handwritten note tucked inside the invitation. Please bring someone this time. Mom is getting worried about you. Love, Hannah. Blake ran his fingers through his sandy brown hair. His hazel eyes reflected frustration as he reread those words. At 6 feet tall, with an athletic build maintained through morning rowing sessions, he had never struggled to attract romantic interest. The struggle was keeping it. Relationships required vulnerability. Vulnerability meant risk. Risk led to the kind of pain Blake had carefully avoided since his disastrous engagement 5 years ago. Better to focus on blueprints and budgets than heartbreak and disappointment. Mr. Montgomery, your 3 o'clock is here. Monica's voice came through the intercom. His executive assistant had worked with him for 7 years and could read his moods from the way he held his coffee cup. Send them in, Blake replied automatically, then paused. Actually, Monica, come in yourself first. Monica entered carrying her tablet and wearing her usual professional expression. She was efficient, intelligent, and one of the few people Blake trusted completely. Her dark eyes immediately spotted the wedding invitation on his desk. Family event coming up? She asked carefully. Blake gestured to the invitation. My sister's wedding. 3 weeks from now. 3 days at a resort in Martha's Vineyard. And I need a date. Monica's eyebrows rose slightly. I see, and the usual pool of candidates is unavailable. There is no pool of candidates, Blake admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. I have not seriously dated anyone in 2 years. My family thinks I am becoming a workaholic recluse. Hannah specifically requested I bring someone so they will stop worrying. Monica set down her tablet thoughtfully. What if you hired someone? Blake stared at her. Excuse me? Professional companion services, Monica explained matter-of-factly. Not escort services, she added quickly, but people who specialize in social events, corporate functions, family gatherings. Think of it as outsourcing a temporary solution to a social problem. Suggestion should have offended him. Blake Montgomery did not outsource important matters. But as he considered 3 days of pitying looks and intrusive questions about his single status, the idea gained appeal. What kind of person would agree to this? He asked. Someone professional, articulate, comfortable with upscale settings, Monica replied. Someone who needs income, but is not desperate. Perhaps a freelancer or entrepreneur. Someone with her own life who would not develop inappropriate attachments. Blake nodded slowly. Find someone. Intelligent, independent, able to hold conversations with architects and artists alike. Someone who will not be impressed or intimidated by wealth. Any appearance preferences? Blake considered this. His past relationships had followed no pattern. Attraction had always been secondary to convenience. Just someone who looks like she belongs with me. Someone natural, not trying too hard. Monica made notes. Timeline. 2 weeks to find her. 1 week to prepare. The wedding runs Friday through Sunday. She will need appropriate clothes, a believable background story, and complete discretion. Compensation? Whatever it takes to make this convincing. An unexpected candidate appears 3 days later. Blake sat in his office reviewing portfolios Monica had compiled. Most candidates seemed too polished, too obviously hired for their looks. Then he reached the last file. Jasmine Rivera, 28 years old. Freelance event planner and photographer based in Brooklyn, her portfolio showed impressive range. Corporate product launches. Intimate gallery openings. Elegant wedding designs. But what caught his attention were the testimonials praising her warmth, adaptability, and ability to handle unexpected situations with grace. The photo showed a woman with honey-colored skin and warm brown eyes that seemed to sparkle with intelligence and humor. Her dark curly hair fell past her shoulders in natural waves. At 5'6", she had an athletic build that spoke of someone comfortable in her own body. She wore jeans and a simple white shirt in the photo, yet somehow looked more elegant than women in designer gowns. "She is different from the others," Monica observed, watching Blake study the file. "More authentic. Less obviously performing." Blake made a decision that felt both calculated and instinctive. Set up a meeting. Tomorrow, if possible. The next afternoon, Jasmine Rivera walked into his office wearing navy pants and a cream blouse that probably cost a fraction of what his suit did. Yet she carried herself with quiet confidence. Blake found himself standing involuntarily, caught off guard by the warmth in her presence. "Miss Rivera, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Please call me Jasmine," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of Brooklyn accent mixed with something warmer, more musical. And I have to admit, when Monica explained this opportunity, I thought it was the strangest job offer I had ever received. Blake appreciated her directness. Stranger than planning a cat's birthday party? He had seen that event in her portfolio. Jasmine laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "Okay, second strangest. But at least the cat did not care if I was convincing." Blake found himself smiling despite his usual professional reserve. He explained the situation. His sister's wedding, his family's concerns, the need for someone who could play the role of girlfriend for 3 days without complications. "Why me specifically?" Jasmine asked when he finished. "Event planning and fake girlfriend services are very different skills. Your client reviews mention grace under pressure, quick thinking, and genuine warmth," Blake replied. "Those are exactly what I need. Also, you photograph naturally, which matters for family pictures." Jasmine's eyes narrowed slightly. "You have seen photos of me?" "Professional research. Your portfolio includes images from events where you appear in the background." She seemed to consider this, her fingers tapping lightly on the chair arm. A nervous gesture, Blake noted, filing it away. "What happens if your family sees through the act?" "They will not," Blake said with certainty. "I have built my career reading people and managing outcomes. I would not have called you here if I was not confident you could succeed. And the compensation. $20,000 plus all expenses. Wardrobe, transportation, accommodations. Considerate payment for exceptional professional discretion." Jasmine's eyes widened slightly. $20,000 clearly meant something to her. Blake had researched enough to know that freelance event planners in Brooklyn struggled with rent and overhead. "I need creative control over my wardrobe and background story," Jasmine said firmly. "And if at any point I feel uncomfortable or unsafe, I walk away with payment for time served." "Agreed." Blake opened his desk drawer and withdrew a contract. "Standard terms with everything we discussed. Take it home. Review it carefully. Let Monica know your decision by tomorrow morning." Jasmine stood, taking the contract. As she moved toward the door, she turned back. "Can I ask you something?" Blake nodded. "What kind of man hires a stranger to pretend to love him?" The question landed like a punch to his carefully protected heart. Blake met her gaze directly. The kind who has forgotten he is worth loving for real. The honesty surprised them both. Jasmine's expression softened with something that looked like understanding mixed with sadness. Then she left, taking the contract and leaving Blake wondering if he had just made a brilliant decision or a terrible mistake. That evening, Blake sat alone in his penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered diamonds. He had everything he thought he wanted. Success, respect, financial security. Yet somehow, hiring someone to fake affection for 3 days felt like the loneliest decision he had ever made. His phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "Cannot wait to meet her? Mom is already planning the seating chart. She is so excited you are finally bringing someone special." Special. The word echoed in his empty apartment. Blake typed back, "Looking forward to it," and wondered what Jasmine Rivera would decide. Would she take the money and help him maintain his carefully constructed walls? Or would she see through to the truth he barely admitted to himself? That somewhere beneath the successful architect and controlled businessman lived a man terrified of wanting something real enough to risk losing it. Arrival at Paradise, the private ferry cut through the blue waters of Nantucket Sound, carrying Blake and Jasmine toward Martha's Vineyard. The September sun painted everything gold, and the salt air smelled of adventure and possibility. Jasmine stood at the railing, her curly hair dancing in the wind.
Ow!
And Blake found himself watching her instead of reviewing his notes. She had signed the contract 2 days after their meeting. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation. Shopping trips where Monica helped Jasmine select clothes that felt expensive without trying too hard. Long phone conversations where they built their backstory. Coffee meetings where they practiced the casual intimacy of a real couple. But nothing had prepared Blake for how natural it felt to have her beside him. She wore white linen pants and a soft blue top that matched the ocean. Simple gold hoops caught the sunlight. She looked effortlessly beautiful, completely herself, and Blake realized that was exactly why Monica had chosen her. "First time to Martha's Vineyard?" Blake asked, moving to stand beside her at the railing. "First time on a private ferry, actually," Jasmine admitted with that warm smile that made his chest tighten. "I keep forgetting to act bored by all this luxury." "Do not act bored," Blake said. "Genuine reactions are more convincing. Besides, I like watching you experience things for the first time." The words came out more intimate than he intended. Jasmine glanced at him, something shifting in her brown eyes. "We should probably practice the couple stuff. You know, before we see your family?" Blake nodded, his heart rate increasing slightly. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, couples touch each other naturally," Jasmine said, stepping closer. "Like this." She took his hand, her fingers warm against his palm. "Or this." She brushed an imaginary speck from his shoulder, her hand lingering. Little gestures that show familiarity. Blake's throat went dry. "Right, familiarity?" He placed his hand on the small of her back, feeling the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric. "Like this?" "Exactly like that," Jasmine whispered. And something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with acting. The resort was stunning. White buildings with blue shutters overlooked private beaches and manicured gardens. Their cottage sat near the main house, surrounded by hydrangeas and wild roses. Blake had requested separate bedrooms, and Monica had made sure the booking specified to master suites. "Wow," Jasmine breathed as they entered. Floor 2 ceiling windows opened onto a private deck with ocean views. The interior was all white linens and natural wood, elegant simplicity that felt both luxurious and welcoming. "2 bedrooms," Blake said quickly, pointing to doors on opposite sides of the living area. "Complete privacy." Something flickered across Jasmine's face. Disappointment? Relief? But she smiled and said, "Perfect." Professional boundaries maintained. They had barely unpacked when Hannah burst through the cottage door, her joy infectious. "Blake." She threw herself into her brother's arms, and Blake caught her, spinning her around like they were kids again. His usually serious face transformed with genuine love. "There's my little sister," Blake said, setting her down. "Ready to get married?" "So ready," Hannah beamed. She had Blake's hazel eyes, but wore her emotions openly, her whole face glowing with happiness. She turned to Jasmine. "And you must be the amazing woman who finally got my brother to bring a date somewhere." Jasmine accepted Hannah's enthusiastic hug naturally. "The pleasure is mine. Congratulations. This place is absolutely magical. Right? Tyler and I fell in love with it immediately." Hannah's eyes sparkled. "Very different from the country club Mom suggested. Speaking of which, she is holding court on the main terrace, probably interrogating the poor florist. Fair warning, she has been asking about you non-stop since Blake called to confirm his +1. Blake moved to Jasmine's side, his hand finding hers with surprising ease. The touch sent warmth up his arm that felt far too real for comfort. "Should I be worried?" Jasmine asked, leaning slightly into him. Only if you cannot handle polite interrogations disguised as friendly conversation, Blake murmured. His breath tickling her ear, Hannah watched them with barely concealed delight. You two are adorable. Seriously, Blake, I have never seen you this relaxed with anyone. After Hannah left to check on wedding details, Blake and Jasmine stood in awkward silence. We convinced her, Jasmine said finally. Yes, we did. But Blake was not thinking about Hannah's approval. He was thinking about how right it had felt to hold Jasmine's hand, to breathe in her subtle perfume, to imagine for just a moment that this was real. Meeting the Montgomery family 2 hours later. Dressed in clothes that whispered money without shouting it, Jasmine and Blake walked toward the main terrace. Jasmine wore a flowing sundress in soft peach that made her skin glow. Blake had changed into khaki pants and a white button-down, looking relaxed in a way his business associates would not recognize. Patricia Montgomery spotted them first. Blake's mother was elegant in white linen, her silver hair perfectly styled, her posture radiating decades of social grace. But her eyes, the same hazel as her son's, held genuine warmth. Blake, darling, Patricia said, offering her cheek for a kiss. Then she turned to Jasmine with interest that felt maternal rather than judgmental. And you must be Jasmine. I am so pleased to finally meet you. The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Montgomery, Jasmine replied, accepting Patricia's embrace naturally. Thank you for including me in such a special weekend. Please call me Patricia. Any woman who can convince my son to take a weekend away from work is already family? Robert Montgomery joined them moments later. He was tall like Blake, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to respect. His handshake was firm, but his smile genuine. So you are the mysterious woman who has been occupying my son's attention? Hardly mysterious, Jasmine said with easy charm. And I would not say I occupy his attention. Your son is remarkably focused when it comes to his work. It's a diplomatic way of saying he is obsessive, Patricia observed with motherly affection. I prefer dedicated, Jasmine countered, and Blake felt something warm bloom in his chest at her defense. The afternoon cocktail reception flowed smoothly. Blake introduced Jasmine to his extended family. Cousins who worked in finance. His father's college roommate. Hannah's bridesmaids. Each introduction felt easier than the last, and Blake found himself genuinely relaxing. What surprised him most was how naturally Jasmine fit. She spoke intelligently about architecture with his father. She made Patricia laugh with stories about disastrous event planning moments. She listened with genuine interest when Tyler's mother talked about teaching kindergarten for 30 years. How did you two meet? Asked Blake's Aunt Diane during dinner on the terrace. Blake and Jasmine had rehearsed this answer, but when she spoke, it felt spontaneous. Art gallery, opening in Boston. Blake was there for a client who collects contemporary work. I was consulting on the exhibition design. We started talking about this controversial sculpture. 3 hours later, the gallery staff was trying to close up around us. What made you notice him? Hannah asked with sisterly mischief. Jasmine glanced at Blake, her brown eyes soft. He listened. Really listened. Not just waiting for his turn to talk. And he asked questions that showed he understood the complexity of art curation, not just the price tags. Blake stared at her, momentarily forgetting his role. That was not their scripted answer. That was something real, something true about how he approached the world. That sounds like Blake, Robert said with paternal pride. Always curious about why people care about what they do. As dinner progressed and the sun set over the ocean, Blake felt himself sinking deeper into the fantasy they had created. Jasmine's hand rested on his arm during conversations. Her laugh at his jokes felt genuine. When she told a story about a wedding planning disaster, her animated expressions made everyone at the table lean in. This was not acting anymore. This was something far more dangerous. Shadows from the past after dinner. The family gathered around the terrace fire pit for drinks and stories. Blake sat on a cushioned bench with Jasmine tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. The position felt so natural that he forgot they were performing until Jasmine shifted slightly, her warmth reminding him this was temporary. I need to tell you something, Hannah said, settling on the sand near their feet. Her face held concern mixed with apology. "Vanessa is here." Blake felt his entire body tense. "What?" "She is staying at the main inn. Tyler's aunt invited her before we realized you were bringing someone." "I am so sorry." "I tried to uninvite her, but Mom said it would be rude." Jasmine looked between them, reading the sudden tension. "Who is Vanessa?" "Blake's ex-fiancée," Hannah said quietly. "They broke up 5 years ago, but she has remained friendly with the family." "Well, she claims it is friendly. I think she is still hoping he will change his mind." Blake forced his breathing to remain steady. Vanessa Price, fashion designer. Beautiful, ambitious, and completely wrong for him in ways he had only recognized after she left. Their engagement had been a disaster of mismatched expectations and emotional manipulation. "It is fine," Blake said, though his jaw was tight. "Ancient history." But Jasmine was studying his face with those perceptive brown eyes. She stood, extending her hand. "Walk with me?" They walked along the beach in silence, waves lapping at their bare feet. The moon painted a silver path across the water. Finally, Jasmine spoke. "You do not have to tell me anything. But if this woman is going to cause problems, I should know what I am walking into." Blake stopped walking, staring out at the dark ocean. "Vanessa and I were together for 2 years. She wanted marriage, children, the whole traditional path. I thought I wanted that too. But the closer we got to the wedding, the more I realized I was agreeing to her vision of our life, not building something together. So you ended it." "She did, actually." 3 months before the wedding, she said I was emotionally unavailable, incapable of real intimacy. She said being with me was like being alone. The words still hurt after 5 years. Blake had spent so long protecting himself from pain that he had become numb to everything else. Jasmine moved closer,
How?
her hand finding his. "She was wrong, was she? Look at this situation. I hired you because I could not manage a real relationship for 3 days. Or maybe," Jasmine said gently, "you hired me because you were not ready to risk your heart again. That is not being incapable of intimacy. That is being human." Blake turned to face her, moonlight illuminating her face. She looked at him with such understanding that something cracked in his carefully maintained walls. "Thank you for saying that, I mean it." Her thumb brushed across his knuckles, and the touch felt intimate, real. Nothing like the performance they were supposed to be maintaining. They stood there on the beach. Hands joined, something shifting between them that neither was quite ready to name. Then Jasmine smiled. "Come on. Let us get back before your family thinks I kidnapped you." But as they walked back to their cottage, Blake could not shake the feeling that everything had changed. Vanessa's presence would complicate matters, but that was not what worried him. What worried him was that somewhere between Boston and Martha's Vineyard, between contracts and performances, he had started to care about Jasmine Rivera in ways that had nothing to do with their professional arrangement. And tomorrow, when Vanessa showed up with her knowing smiles and pointed comments, Blake would have to convince everyone, including himself, that what he felt for Jasmine was just very good acting. The problem was, his heart was no longer sure what was performance and what was terrifyingly, wonderfully real. When perfect plans fall apart, the rehearsal dinner took place in the resort's elegant pavilion overlooking the water. White drapes billowed in the evening breeze, and candles created intimate pools of light across long tables. Jasmine wore an emerald dress that Blake had watched her select 2 weeks ago, but seeing her in it now, with her curls swept into a soft updo and simple gold jewelry catching the candlelight, made his breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, as they walked toward the pavilion. Jasmine glanced at him, something vulnerable in her expression. "You do not have to say things like that when we are alone." "I know." Blake took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "That is why I said it." The evening began smoothly. Blake and Jasmine sat with Hannah and Tyler's wedding party, conversations flowing easily around wine and laughter. Blake felt himself relaxing into the warmth of family and the presence of the woman beside him whose smile made his chest, tight with feelings he was not ready to examine. Then Vanessa Price arrived. She entered the pavilion like someone walking a runway. All confidence and calculated beauty, Her red hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. Her black dress probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was stunning in a deliberate way that demanded attention. But what made Blake's stomach drop was the expression on her face as she surveyed the room. This was not the look of someone attending a family friend's wedding. This was the look of someone on a mission.
"Oh, Blake,"
Vanessa said, gliding toward their table with predatory grace. "How wonderful to see you. And you must be the girlfriend I have been hearing so much about." Her tone made the word girlfriend sound like an accusation. Jasmine rose gracefully, extending her hand. "Jasmine Rivera." "Lovely to meet you, Vanessa Price. Blake and I were engaged once." Did he mention that? The words were designed to establish territory, to create discomfort. "He did," Jasmine replied calmly. "Ancient history, I understand." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Is it, though? Some connections run deeper than time." Blake stood, his hand finding the small of Jasmine's back. "Vanessa, this is not the time or place." "For what? Catching up with old friends?" Vanessa's eyes glittered with something that looked like triumph, mixed with pain. "I am simply curious about your sudden relationship. You spent 5 years claiming you were not ready for commitment, and now here you are, looking quite committed." Hannah appeared at Blake's elbow, her bridesmaid dress swishing with her quick movement. "Vanessa, we should find your seat. The dinner is about to start." Vanessa was not finished. She turned to address the nearby tables, her voice carrying across the pavilion. "I just think it is fascinating timing. Blake Montgomery, who could not commit to me after 2 years together, suddenly has a serious girlfriend right when family pressure for him to settle down reaches its peak." The conversations around them quieted. Heads turned. Blake felt Jasmine tense beside him, but her face remained composed. "What exactly are you implying?" Jasmine asked, her voice steady despite the attention focused on them. "I am implying that Blake has always been very good at managing appearances, at giving people what they expect to see rather than what is real." Vanessa's gaze swept between them. "How long have you two actually been together?" 6 months. "And how much of that time has been genuine versus convenient?" "That is enough," Blake said, his voice carrying an edge that made several people flinch. But Vanessa had opened a door that could not be easily closed. "Is it?" "Because I have known Blake for 7 years. I know how he treats relationships like business transactions, how he keeps people at arm's length, how he prefers control over connection." She smiled sadly. "I loved him enough to walk away when I realized he would never really let me in. I just hope you know what you were getting into, Jasmine." The words landed like bombs across the elegant dinner setting. Blake could see his parents' concerned expressions. Hannah looked devastated. Tyler appeared ready to intervene. And Jasmine stood beside him, her hand still in his, her face carefully neutral. "The truth will set you free." Jasmine took a breath, and Blake felt her straighten beside him. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the suddenly silent pavilion. "You want to know the truth about Blake and me? The real truth?" Blake's heart stopped. This was it. The moment where their carefully constructed story would crumble, where he would be exposed as the man too damaged to form real connections, too controlled to risk genuine vulnerability. "The truth is," Jasmine continued, her brown eyes finding his with an intensity that made everything else disappear, "that I agreed to come here under false pretenses. Blake hired me. $20,000 to play the role of his girlfriend for 3 days." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Robert's face hardened with disappointment. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, and Vanessa's expression transformed into something uglier than triumph. It looked like vindication, but Jasmine was not finished. "He hired me because he was tired of disappointing his family, because he loves his sister enough to want her wedding to be about her happiness, not his romantic failures. Because he has spent so long protecting himself from pain that he forgot how to let people close." She turned to face Blake fully, her hand still in his, her voice softening. "But the truth is also this. Somewhere between the contract signing and the carefully rehearsed backstory, something happened. Somewhere between the professional arrangement and the practiced intimacy, I forgot we were pretending." Blake could not breathe, could not think, could only stare at the woman who was dismantling every wall he had built with nothing but honesty and courage. The truth is that I fell in love with a man who listens when people talk, who cares deeply but shows it through actions rather than words, who is so afraid of being hurt again that he would rather pay someone to fake affection than risk asking for it genuinely. Tears were streaming down Jasmine's face now, but her voice remained strong. So yes, Vanessa, you are right. This started as a performance, but it became real for me. Terrifyingly. Completely real. And I do not know if Blake feels the same way, but I am done pretending either way. The silence that followed was absolute. 200 people held their breath, waiting to see what Blake Montgomery would do when confronted with the kind of vulnerability he had spent a lifetime avoiding. Blake looked at Jasmine, at her tears and her courage and her heart laid bare in front of everyone. He thought about the past 2 weeks of phone calls that stretched longer than necessary. Coffee meetings, where they laughed about nothing important. The way his chest tightened when she smiled. The way touching her felt like coming home to a place he had never been. He thought about Vanessa's words. That he treated relationships like transactions. That he kept everyone at arm's length. That he preferred control over connection. She had been right. But looking at Jasmine, Blake realized he did not want to be that person anymore. Without breaking eye contact, Blake pulled out his phone. He called Monica, putting it on speaker so everyone could hear. Mr. Montgomery, is everything okay? Monica's professional voice filled the quiet. Monica, I need you to cancel a contract. The agreement with Jasmine Rivera? Terminate it immediately. Full payment is agreed, but the professional arrangement is over as of right now. Sir, are you certain? There are still obligations through Sunday. There are no more obligations, Blake said firmly, his eyes never leaving Jasmine's face. Miss Rivera is no longer my employee. She is no longer bound by any agreement. As of this moment, anything she says or does is entirely her choice, not her job. He ended the call and slipped the phone away. Then he took both of Jasmine's hands in his, aware of the audience but no longer caring. Jasmine Rivera, he began, and his voice cracked slightly on her name. 3 weeks ago, I hired you because I needed someone who could pretend to care about me for 72 hours. What I got was someone who taught me that maybe I am worth caring about for real. A sob escaped Jasmine's lips, but Blake continued, the words pouring out after years of emotional constipation. You asked me what kind of man pays strangers to pretend to love him. The answer is a man who has forgotten what it feels like to hope. A man so afraid of rejection that he would rather buy affection than risk asking for it. His voice dropped to something raw and honest. But you made me remember what it feels like to want more. To want something real and messy and terrifying. He was vaguely aware that Patricia was crying, that Hannah had her hand over her heart, that even Robert looked moved. But all Blake could see was Jasmine. I love you, he said simply. Not because you were hired to make my family happy. Not because you fit some role I needed filled. I love you because you see through my walls and like what you find anyway. Because you make me laugh. Because being with you feels like the first honest thing I have done in years. Blake took a shaky breath. I have no right to ask this after everything. But if you meant what you said, if any part of you actually loves me back, could we start over? No contracts. No performances. Just two people figuring out if what they feel is real? Jasmine was fully crying now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. She looked absolutely beautiful. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes, you impossible man. Yes. When Blake kissed her, the pavilion erupted in applause, but he barely heard it. He was too focused on the way Jasmine's lips felt against his, the way she melted into his arms. The way this felt nothing like performance and everything like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Hannah was beside them, crying and laughing simultaneously. That was either the most romantic or most ridiculous thing I have ever seen, she said, hugging them both. Possibly both. Patricia approached next, her elegant composure cracked by maternal emotion. Blake Montgomery, you are absolutely absurd. But she was smiling through tears. But if you love her, truly love her, Then we are happy for you both. Even Robert's stern expression had softened. Son, that was quite possibly the most dramatic way to start a relationship I have ever witnessed. But your mother is right. If Miss Rivera makes you happy, we welcome her to the family. Vanessa had disappeared at some point during the confession. Her mission to expose their arrangement backfiring spectacularly, Blake felt a surge of gratitude toward her. Without her interference, he might have let Jasmine walk away without ever admitting the truth the rest of the dinner. Passed in a blur of well-wishes and questions and family members wanting to hear the whole story, Blake and Jasmine told it honestly. The contract, the preparation, the moment they realized their feelings were real. By the end, even the most skeptical relatives seemed charmed by the unconventional love story. Later that night, back at their cottage, Blake and Jasmine stood on the deck overlooking the moonlit ocean. That was insane, Jasmine said. Leaning against the railing, completely insane, Blake agreed. Moving to stand behind her, his arms circling her waist. No regrets. Jasmine turned in his arms, her face serious. One, Blake's heart clenched. What? That we wasted 2 weeks pretending when we could have been figuring this out for real. She smiled, and it transformed her face with joy. But I suppose some things are worth the wait. Blake kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the taste of truth after so many carefully constructed lies. For the record, I would have paid much more than $20,000 for this. Jasmine laughed, the sound carrying across the water. Good thing I am willing to renegotiate the terms of our arrangement. What are the new terms? You take me on real dates. You introduce me to your friends as your actual girlfriend. You let me see the man behind the walls, not just the successful architect. She paused, her expression softening. And you promise to try. To really try at this relationship thing, even when it gets scary or messy or hard. I promise, Blake said, and meant it with everything in him. What do I get in return? Me, Jasmine said simply. All of me. The event planner who works crazy hours, the woman who cries at romantic movies, the person who will challenge you and push you and never let you hide behind emotional distance again. Best deal I ever made, Blake murmured against her lips. 6 months later, the art gallery opening in Brooklyn was packed with collectors, artists, and culture enthusiasts. Jasmine moved through the crowd with professional ease, checking details and ensuring the evening flowed smoothly. This was her first major gallery showing as lead curator, and everything had to be perfect. Blake watched from across the room, his chest swelling with pride. In 6 months, their relationship had become the most important thing in his life. They had moved slowly, learning each other's rhythms and fears and dreams. There had been arguments about his work hours and her tendency to take on too many projects. There had been moments of doubt when old fears resurfaced, but there had also been lazy Sunday mornings in bed. Dinners where they talked for hours. Weekend trips where they explored new places together. And slowly, carefully, Blake had learned that love did not have to mean losing himself. With Jasmine, he felt more himself than ever before. She is amazing, is she not? Hannah appeared at his elbow, now Mrs. Tyler Walsh, glowing with newlywed happiness. She really is, Blake agreed. I am glad you found each other, Hannah said, squeezing his arm, even if it took a fake girlfriend scheme to make it happen. Best, worst decision I ever made. Across the room, Jasmine caught his eye and smiled. That same warm, genuine smile that had first captured his attention in his office 6 months ago. She mouthed, "Love you," and Blake felt his heart expand with gratitude for the courage to try, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the woman who had taught him that the best things in life were the ones he had not planned for at all. He mouthed back, "Love you too," and knew with absolute certainty that this was no performance. This was real, messy, imperfect, and absolutely perfect, just as love was meant to be.